Everything should be recycled. Every material, everything we use from cars to clothes to computers, all of it should be designed to be recycled into something new. And not just that, it should actually be cheaper to recycle than it is to manufacture something new. We are living in the age of the Anthropocene, where humans are the dominant force driving global change. And up until now, our economic systems have thrived on the idea of endless growth, taking more resources from the planet and throwing away more stuff. But if we want to have any hope for the future, we need to rethink how we interact with the planet. We need a new model for the way we live. In my opinion, that model needs to be based around closing the loop. So in this video, I'm going to go through 5 policy ideas I think will help us close the loop. Welcome to the show. The first policy idea is total recycling. It sounds straightforward enough, right? Just recycle everything. Well, yes, but also no. Because while we do recycle certain materials today, like paper or plastic, that's only after we've used them once and thrown them away. What we really need is a system that designs products to be taken apart and recycled multiple times over into different products. Products can be designed in such a way that they can easily be disassembled at the end of their life, so the materials inside can be reused. Designing products for disassembly is called design for recycling or design for disassembly, and companies are already doing it. But what if there's a material in your phone that isn't worth repairing? For materials that aren't recyclable by others, another company called Terra has a solution. They offer a proprietary solution for recycling lithium-ion batteries from electric vehicles. Their process allows them to sort the materials inside the battery and then reuse or recycle the various components. Despite these examples, the reality is that most things aren't designed to be disassembled. Take this chair, for example. This looks like a fairly simple object, but trying to disassemble it reveals that it's actually made up of many different materials, some of which are glued together. This makes it very difficult to take apart and recycle. To solve this problem, one designer came up with a chair made up of only one type of material, 3D printed plastic. That way, the whole thing can be melted down and made into something new. But while these examples show that recycling individual products is possible, it doesn't address the bigger issue. Products often aren't designed for disassembly because the cost of recycling is higher than the cost of just manufacturing something new. So the first policy we need is to make it cheaper to recycle than to manufacture. There are 2 ways to do this. The first is to subsidize recycling. Governments can pay companies to recycle certain materials by offering tax breaks or direct payments. The second way is to tax manufacturing. By taxing manufacturers, governments can increase the cost of producing something new and therefore make recycling more competitive. Now the trouble with subsidies is that they tend to encourage waste. After all, why pay for recycling if you don't have to? So perhaps the best solution is a combination of both, a tax on manufacturing and a subsidy on recycling. Ideally, the subsidy on recycling would only apply if the company proves that they are recycling their products. Then if you manufacture something, you'll have to pay a tax, and if you recycle it, you'll get a rebate. That way, recycling becomes cheaper and manufacturers are incentivized to design their products to be taken apart. Ideally, we would eventually stop giving out subsidies altogether. Instead, the price of raw materials would simply be higher, reflecting their true cost, including the environmental damage they cause and the cost of recycling them. Okay, the next idea is to stop chasing Moore's Law. You might not know it, but there's a universal law in tech called Moore's Law, which says that the number of transistors in a chip doubles every 2 years. Moore's Law basically says that computing power will continue to increase exponentially. But this exponential growth can't continue forever. There's a limit to how small we can make transistors. And hitting that limit means that further improvements will require huge amounts of money and resources. Take Moore's Law and replace it with a linear trend instead. By setting expectations that computers will improve at a slower rate, we might be able to slow down the pressure to constantly upgrade. And let's face it, how much use do you really get out of your gadgets before you upgrade? 2 years? 3 years? By slowing down the pace of improvement, we can reduce the amount of e-waste we produce. Which brings us to the next idea, carbon capture. The challenge is that currently carbon capture is expensive, but it doesn't have to be. One study found that in Norway, the cost of carbon capture can be reduced by about 65% by creating a government-backed carbon transport infrastructure. By investing in this infrastructure now, we can bring down the cost of carbon capture so we can start closing the loop on fossil fuel emissions. Right now, solar panels and wind turbines are great, but they rely on materials like lithium, cobalt, and neodymium, which are in short supply. So what are the alternatives? Well, the good news is that solar cells don't necessarily have to use silicon. Some of the most promising alternatives come from thin-film solar, which can be manufactured using non-toxic materials like copper indium, gallium selenide. And while wind turbines typically use large amounts of rare earth metals, new designs like the Savonius wind turbine don't. The Savonius design uses very few magnets and therefore requires much less neodymium. We can also start to phase out our reliance on fossil fuels and move towards a sustainable model of energy generation. And finally, that brings us to the last policy idea, which is more serviceable technology. Like I mentioned earlier, products can be designed to be easily taken apart so that you can either repair them yourself or send them off to be recycled. Take this iFixit toolkit, for example. This is an example of a product that's been designed for disassembly. The handle comes off, and each part is labeled with its own part number. The screws are all the same, making it easy to disassemble. Even the glue sticks are designed to break cleanly. Compare this to the iPhone 7, which is notoriously hard to disassemble. Not only does it have a lot of screws, but they're different lengths, and they're all different types. Then there's the adhesive, which holds many of the components in place. Of course, the iPhone is designed this way to prevent you from opening it up. That's why it's much easier to replace your screen at a repair shop than it is to do it yourself. But what if we flip this around? What if we incentivize companies to make their products more serviceable? One way we could do this is to create a rating system for repairability. Manufacturers could submit their products to an independent organization that would take them apart and assess their design. Companies could earn points for using standardized parts, for using easily removable fasteners, and for designing parts that are easy to replace. This is similar to the Energy Star program in the United States, which sets minimum standards for energy efficiency. The Energy Star label gives consumers the confidence that the products they buy meet certain standards. Something similar could be done for repairability. Companies could also be incentivized by government contracts. Many governments purchase products for their citizens, whether it's computers for schools or furniture for public offices. These purchases have a huge impact on the market. So if governments demanded more repairable products, manufacturers would have a strong incentive to design them. Apple is actually already doing something like this. They have a program called Right to Repair, which gives customers access to technical information and tools to repair their Apple products. This includes repair manuals, parts diagrams, software tools, and even parts. This initiative has been praised by consumer advocacy groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation and iFixit. The idea is that if we incentivize manufacturers to make their products more serviceable, consumers will have more control over the products they buy. They'll be able to repair them, upgrade them, and even replace parts without having to pay expensive service fees. So those are my 5 policy ideas for how we can start closing the loop. Now, these won't solve every problem, but they are a good starting point for how we might move forward. If you have any other ideas, I would love to hear them. And if you want to see more videos on climate solutions, let me know. Thanks for watching.